Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us. This video is going to take you through Smart Manufacturing and IIoT. My name is Tom Knauer. I'm part of the Global Product Management team for Balluff. So let's get started. We've got several different topics we're going to take you through today. We're going to start with just kind of an overview of Smart Manufacturing and IIoT and some of the drivers in the industry. Then we'll start to get a little more tactical and talk about how you connect the devices and different pieces of things in the factory to the networks and up to the higher levels. We'll talk about the role that device level protocols play in the hierarchy of the factory pyramid and connectivity system. Then why it's important to invest in the device level protocols and IIoT. And then we'll get into some real life examples of how people are using this, including a short video that takes you through an actual application with multiple different aspects of a factory and how those are all connected together and how that data can move up into higher levels of the factory wherever it's needed. So let's get started. So some of the key trends that are driving the manufacturing world include things like changes in the workforce, inflation, tariffs and trade issues, constant pressure to reduce costs, use of energy, shorter supply chains, mass industrialization and lower product counts in terms of high volume, low mix, and also at the other end of the spectrum, high mix and low volume. These things drive a broad range of needs in the automation world. Primarily things like more automation, digitalization, and robotics, more flexible factories, smart devices, the communications to connect those smart devices, and then software and AI all play a role in bringing this picture together to help manufacturers address these key cost pressures. Really, the key thing here is that manufacturers are constantly being driven and focused on being more efficient, getting more out of their equipment and their facility, and improving overall equipment effectiveness. What does this mean for your manufacturing goals? When we talk to customers, there's a variety of things they're focusing on when they're talking about overall equipment factory effectiveness and getting the most out of their factory. They want to reduce their total costs, both in the supply chain and the manufacturing side of things, reducing their scrap and improving their quality, improving asset utilization, machine availability and uptime, and reducing unplanned downtime and the small stops that occur that disrupt production. These are all part of Smart's manufacturing system that can help you attain these goals and help using IIoT and smart manufacturing solutions to get to improvement in these areas. So what are the basics of smart manufacturing? When we talk to customers, they're focused on three things: efficiency, flexibility, and visibility. And we'll take you through a little bit about examples of these and how they can, again, affect overall equipment effectiveness and efficiency in the factory. So first of all, efficiency. We focus here on unplanned downtime, which means having diagnostics at the devices. So this is where we start to talk about having enhanced information that's available both at the device and in the higher level control system. Things like networking blocks that have information displays, the LED indicators to indicate status, and device indicators at the individual connection points that tell you whether the device is functioning properly or is shut off. We also talk about condition monitoring. Condition monitoring systems that help you gather data out of the sensors and assess the condition and what's happening at the machine or on different parts of the machine. These things all connect together to help you reduce unplanned downtime, and as you connect all the pieces together, you've got common interfaces, common signaling methods, whether we're talking about the condition monitoring side of things or individual sensors or other devices that are connected to this. That you have a network and a common way of looking at things, and that you can quickly and easily get diagnostic information at the device to reduce your downtime, but also take that information and network it up. And we'll talk a little more about the networking aspect of this. Flexibility. Meeting the demands in this high mix, low volume world, but also the high volume, low mix world. We have examples of customers who are very focused on this manufacturing flexibility. For example, we've got a customer who makes ATVs and has about 96 different variations of the powertrain on that one production line. They have to be able to adapt to each different powertrain as that is moving down the production line and adjust on the fly. We've got another customer who's making seats. They've got 40,000 different variations of seats that they make on that line. And they have to be able to, again, adapt that process for each different seat as it comes without disrupting and stopping the whole manufacturing process for changeover. And then finally, shoe manufacturing. Nike has the ability now to configure your shoe online and have that shoe produced to your specific needs, your specific size, your specific color patterns, your specific model. This, as we see it, goes from relatively simple flexibility to very high flexibility manufacturing systems that can produce a wide variety of products on the same production line. So what are the things that enable this? This is all done through IIoT and smart manufacturing. These are the things that enable this. We're talking about smart devices, the networking communications to connect those devices, robots and cobots and automated machinery, digital transformation and software, vision systems, traceability, 3D printing, condition monitoring, machine safety, and other things. Integrating all these different parts of the manufacturing system together is made more efficient and more simple when we start to talk about IIoT and smart manufacturing. The final aspect that we talked about is visibility. We've got a wide variety of people in the facility. We've got people on the shop floor. We've got managers that are responsible for different areas of the facility. We've got an overall manager maybe for the complete plant, and then maybe global people. They're all looking for information in a different way. We've got fewer and fewer support staff on the floor. We've got 24/7 hours, 7-day-a-week production. We've got people who are working remotely. And we all need to have this information flowing together to those people in their different roles. And so we can see we want to start to have visibility at the high organizational level, plant level, machine level, and so on down to the individual device on the floor, so that wherever a problem occurs or whether we're facing challenges in the production system, we can quickly and easily troubleshoot and address that, or just gather the ongoing process data to help us manage our overall factory or our groups of factories or our cells on the factory floor. So the key thing is that we're able to access this information anywhere in the world. Again, whether it's on the shop floor, at the factory, or at the global headquarters. So what does this play in terms of the realistic implementation on the shop floor? We've got data coming from many different places, many different machines, or different components of machines even, and we need to think about how we enable that information that applies to our efficiency side of things, our flexibility side of things, our visibility side of things, and tie that all together. And this is, again, where smart manufacturing and IIoT come into play. So how do we connect all these pieces together? Well, let's start by thinking about the basic sensors. The sensors are the bottom level of the factory, the basic level where the data is being gathered and started. Think about a human analogous body. The sensors are basically your eyes and ears, fingers, touch. They are gathering that data from what's happening. You also have things like similar to your hearing, RFID systems. You have the nerve pathways, which are connecting all these devices. You have the brain, which is the controller, such as a CNC controller, motion controller, or PLC. And then finally, you have the actuators, which are the muscles. And so these are all tied together, similar to a human body, by nerve pathways. You've got the brain doing the control systems. You've got the fingers and the eyes and the ears doing the sensing. And then you've got the muscles that are moving things. So let's talk a little bit about the sensors and the devices you start to see on the machines. There's a wide variety of sensors on the machines and applications in the factory, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. You may have vision systems, inductive sensors, photoelectric sensors, magnetic sensors, mechanical position sensors, vibration sensors, safety sensors. But we're not only talking about sensors. There's lots of other devices that are on a machine or on the factory floor and pieces of equipment. Maybe RFID for traceability. You've got your actuators, again, your motion control, whether it's servo motors or linear motors. You've got valves and signaling devices, cables, power supplies. All this different equipment is existing to make one or more functions on the factory floor happen. So the question is, how do you tie all this together in an efficient way? Because integration can often present a wide variety of challenges. If we're talking about wiring all these things back to a central control cabinet for a PLC or a CNC control, we can talk about many long cable runs back to the cabinet, lots of terminations that take a lot of time to connect into that cabinet. What happens if you have layout changes? It makes it difficult to do that and to trace things. You've got slip rings often where things are moving to send power and signal across moving axes. And then finally, troubleshooting can be a big challenge because you don't know exactly which sensor or which device has failed without extensive troubleshooting. This is where we start to talk about device-level protocols coming into play to enable much simpler and easier connection, scaling up and down of systems, using open architecture and open controls, and making it easier to troubleshoot and address these problems that we often see by hardwired systems. This is a typical architecture here. Starting at the very lowest level, we've got the sensors and actuators, both on the standard side and safety side. We've got control systems, we've got enterprise, and we've got the cloud. So where do these pieces all play? Again, various different levels of the factory. We've got various different levels of pieces of equipment that are out there, and we need to start talking about connectivity. At the highest level, we're talking nowadays about an Ethernet-based network. That's connecting the control system to the enterprise level, the control system to the cloud, or the enterprise system to the cloud. Generally, we're talking about Ethernet-based systems. Between the factory data gathering systems and hubs and blocks, we've generally used some kind of an industrial Ethernet, such as Ethernet IP, EtherCAT, or Profinet. We're also talking about using those control-to-control connectivity, PLC to PLC, CNC to CNC. And at the very bottom level now, we're starting to talk about device-level networks. Instead of doing all that hardwiring back to the PLC, we're starting to do the same kind of networking or similar networking that we have at these higher levels, connecting the individual devices through some kind of a networking block, and then that block resides on an Ethernet-based industrial protocol. So let's talk about the differences between Ethernet-based protocols and the device-level protocols. Each has its own purpose, each has its own pluses and minuses, and we'll go through those a little bit. So on the Ethernet-based level, again, we're talking about connecting controls to each other, controls up to higher level systems, or even to remote I/O blocks. Those are kind of the typical ones. Fairly high data transmission rates, fairly high amount of data, and longer distances. The challenge is we have to use one IP address per each connected device. The chipset built into those devices can be large and fairly expensive, and adding each device to the network can be fairly expensive. On the other hand, device-level protocols, there's a variety of them up here, and we'll talk a little more about those, are good for connecting the sensors to the networking blocks, right? And then those networking blocks will reside on the Ethernet industrial-based protocol. The data transmission rates are a little bit lower. The amount of data is significantly lower that can be transmitted. The distances are shorter, but we're also not using as many IP addresses. Each individual sensor and device doesn't need to have its own IP address. The IP addresses are only assigned to the blocks that connect the signal from those. The chipset is much smaller and less expensive. You can put the IO-Link chipset into a very small sensor, and so the cost to add that chipset to each device is much lower. So how does this look, again, in the factory environment? We've got the pyramid that came from one of the previous slides. Again, your devices and sensors at the lowest level, your networking blocks and connectivity devices in the middle level, then up to a higher level block or a higher level networking system, the PLC or the control system, and then finally some kind of an enterprise management system or even the cloud. So the reality of the connectivity, when you look at the pluses and minuses of this, is that you're going to have to probably implement multiple protocols for multiple levels of the factory. Generally, again, the Ethernet protocol is good for high amounts of data, high-speed transmission, high-speed connectivities, really good for PLC to PLC and higher connectivity, but it's not going to be cost effective and it's not going to be efficient to put that down into every sensor. That's where the IO-Link and the device level protocols come into play. Lower cost to connect, can carry the right amount of data at the right speed for those devices. You can still have real-time control. They're very fast for that. But again, limited in the amount of data. You're not going to want to connect a PLC to a PLC using a device level protocol. The data capability and the speed isn't there. So how do we talk about now a little bit about the evolution of these protocols? So when we look at the history of the evolution PLC to device connectivity, we used to hardwire everything back to the cabinet. I talked about this. Lots of cables going back in, lots of terminal blocks for the terminations. Each one of these has to be individually wired and connected. And then you've got many different I/O blocks in your PLC rack depending on how large the system is, including specialty block rack interface modules for safety. So as we started to move to device level protocols, we started to be able to be more efficient in the way we connect things. We could get rid of these long terminal, these multiple terminal block runs back to the out to the device, and we could start to use a single network interface, connect those devices with very short cables and off-the-shelf cables to a block, and then daisy chain those blocks one after the other down the row, meaning much less cabling, much simpler cabling, off-the-shelf M12, M8 connectors to make the connectivity quick, simple. As we got even more advanced, we started to be able to expand this concept to the safety world. So going from standard to now using the same concept of this hub or block and networking system rather than individual cable runs all the way back to the system. And then the final thing was adding capability for protocols like IO-Link, which had much broader capability, not only to get the on-off data or the analog data out of the sensor, but also do things like parameterization, health device checks, and so on, taking that added bandwidth and added data capability that the protocol brings and that the chipset built into that device brings, so that you can now have enhanced data and information coming out of that sensor rather than just is something there or isn't something there or the analog values. So let's talk a little more about some examples of device level protocols. Some of the most well-known ones, CAN Open, the OSI interface and OSI safety standard. We've got DeviceNet, and now we have IO-Link, which has both standard and a safety standard that's come out. IO-Link has really started to take off for a variety of reasons. It's broadly supported, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So why do we want to talk about IO-Link here? Well, it's a real nice, simple point-to-point connection system, generally using M12 cables. There are versions that allow you to use M8, connect to M8 devices, but they're off-the-shelf, inexpensive cables, standard. You can get them from pretty much any industrial automation supplier. You can connect both IO-Link devices, but also non-IO-Link devices. So if you've got a mix of sensors out there, there's some that you want to get that additional IO-Link data from. You can connect those to the same networking block that you connect your existing standard sensors that just give you that on-off signal to. So you can have a mix of sensors and different types of devices out there. You're able to very easily connect to pretty much any industrial Ethernet protocol. These blocks, we call them master blocks, that connect down to the lower level IO-Link devices can now speak Ethernet IP, EtherCAT, Profinet, and so on, a wide range of different Ethernet protocols. And now there are many, many different varieties out there that are already multi-protocol, where you buy one specific master and it can talk and self-identify whatever network it's been connected to. You don't need to buy a special flavor. You don't need to do configuration of the network that you're connecting to. And then the other key thing here about IO-Link is that it's an open standard. With many suppliers, more than 400 suppliers already on board, pretty much every major industrial automation supplier has some IO-Link devices, and there's tens of thousands of devices out there in the IO-Link library. And the other key thing about this standardization and the open protocol is that you can pretty much connect any supplier's device to any IO-Link master, and it should work. You don't have to stay with one device supplier, one sensor supplier, and one master block supplier. You can buy from anybody else, so you can mix and match best in class devices, or if somebody doesn't supply a device, you can go out and find a third party that generally will. And so you've got a very broad range of solutions out there. The other thing is that you've got a standard organization that's made up of many different suppliers, the managing body of this, and they make sure that there's compliance with the standards and with the configuration so that the devices will work together. So the other key thing here, as we mentioned before, is that it connects to any higher level network, which means it's controller agnostic. So whether you're buying Siemens controllers, Rockwell, or so on, you can connect the IO-Link master to that appropriate network. And it's also robot agnostic. Most of the robot suppliers have some kind of interface block that works with one of these higher level Ethernet protocols, so you can connect an IO-Link master into that protocol and work with your robot of choice. So let's talk a little more about IO-Link specifically in the data. Again, I mentioned we don't only have the process data itself, where you get the on-off signal from the device. So let's say it's a photoelectric sensor that's detecting part presence. Is the part there, is it not? But you're also getting additional data, service and device data that tells you about the device itself, whether it's data like internal temperature or number of cycles or so on. And then you also can set up event data, special alarms and special information that get triggered on a special event, so that maybe you're doing a thing like a counter where after 100 counts, you want to set an alarm to have somebody come over and just reset the machine or doing something. You have a broad range of capabilities in IO-Link that you don't have in a normal standard sensor, which normally only would provide the process data, the on-off or analog signal. Now let's talk a little more about why you might want to invest in IO-Link or in a device level protocol. We talked about efficiency, flexibility, and visibility as three of the key things that our customers have been working with us on. Well, data is the critical element. Data is what makes your machine and equipment efficient and can help you drive to higher levels of efficiency. Data is what helps you make the flexibility in the facility, and data is, of course, what you're displaying on the visibility side of things. So you've got your devices and you've got the data. Well, how do you bring that together? Well, first of all, you've got the connectivity. Again, the ability to connect each of these devices through a standard off-the-shelf cable to a central block that gathers that data is made very simple and easy by IO-Link. The device network, again, takes that data, and in the case of IO-Link, not only the on-off or the analog data, but also that additional machine data. So you've got even more data that you can start to use in your process to make things efficient. And then finally, you can connect out through these devices, through these blocks, to higher levels of the hierarchy, whether it's your controller, whether it's your factory management, SCADA or MES system, or even the cloud. You have very simple, easy connectivity to take that data from the device itself, through the blocks, and then out to wherever you need it. And it's plug and play, so that you plug the device in, the block can be very quickly and easily configured, and then that data can be very quickly and easily configured to be pulled out to where it's needed at the highest levels of the factory. So as we see, we've got all these different points of data. We want to be making sure that we can easily and quickly connect that and gather it and take it to where we need it. So here are a long list of the benefits. We've talked about the easier and lower costs to connect. We've talked about no special networking, fewer IP addresses, compatible with existing sensors and networks, supported by many different vendors. Condition monitoring data and predictive maintenance data can come out of the devices now, and it's cloud accessible. But is anybody else actually doing this? So here are some real world examples. The first one is a smart cell. In this case, we've got a customer who is doing end effectors on a machine, and they need to do tool changes. And so they've got a bunch of different end effectors that they change. So what they've done is they've put their I/O, the sensors and sensor connect blocks on the end of the device, and then they do a quick and easy tool change. That's enabled by having what we call an inductive coupler, which instead of having connectors on it for each connection and disconnection and change of the tool, you have data and power brought over a tool gap, which allows for much quicker changeover. As quoted by the customer, they had about 15% improved throughput and speed of changing the tools because they didn't have to connect and disconnect manually. So if we look at this is the diagram of what they had. Everything had to be manual connected. You can see now, however, that you've got an air gap connector, rapid changeover, less maintenance because it's a non-contact connection. Those connectors that connect and disconnect wear out over time or bend. And then again, you have the flexibility to have one robot do quick and efficient tool changes where you can use one robot for multiple tasks rather than having to have multiple robots that have fixed tooling on the end. Next one here, they were talking about consolidation of cables. We talked early on about the evolution of a control system where you had long cable runs. In this case, they've had some long conveyors. In the past, they would have had many, many different cables, big bundles, running all the way back to the control cabinet. In this case, they were able to network using an Ethernet-based protocol out to device blocks. Those blocks then connected to the individual devices. Much easier to connect and disconnect, to scale it up or scale it down. And it saved them a lot of time and effort in terms of the labor to build panels, to wire things, to connect, and to troubleshoot, of course. So you can see here, this is an example diagram of a typical panel in the past. Sensors connected through terminal blocks to the PLC. The new configuration, sensors connected to a networking block, which is connected by Ethernet cable back to the PLC. Much faster design, reduced size of the panel. They can build more panels in the same amount of time, and then much faster to troubleshoot because the individual data coming out of each sensor can tell you if there's something wrong or not, and you can trace it very quickly and easily down to the individual sensor or individual block or individual cable. Another one here, another customer, their key factor was the weight in the end-of-arm tooling. The less weight you have in terms of devices and the end-of-arm tooling itself, the more weight you can carry in the things you're picking up and moving. So by doing that, you can either lightweight the total system or you can carry heavier parts. In this case, by using special I/O blocks and reducing the amount of cabling, the customer was able to dramatically reduce the weight in the end-of-arm tool and therefore, in some cases, use a smaller robot or carry heavier things. So here we see again an example of the end-of-arm tooling. This is a more traditional approach, very large block with lots of cabling coming out there, large valve manifold. We're able to dramatically downsize that and downscale it, much lighter blocks, and using I/O link to run back to the machine versus lots of heavy cables. So that means less weight on the end-of-arm tool, less space needed on that end-of-arm tool, which also allows you to downsize it, and then fewer cables, reducing the complexity, improving the troubleshooting. This example here is a company that is building palletizing systems. They had a wide variety of sensors on the robot, including standard sensors, some signaling devices, safety. They needed to integrate all this together. Rather than running lots of wires back to the control cabinet and scaling it up or down depending on the customer, because this is a prepackaged system, they deliver various sizes and versions of this to customers. They used I/O link to make it very easy to add sensors, take away sensors depending on the size of the system, add safety scanners, reduce safety scanners and e-stops, and made this a very scalable and easy to use system. Here's what an original cell might have looked like, a lot of different devices, and they've been able to scale that down by using simple connectivity both on the safety and non-safety side. So it's a single cable, single protocol. They're able to get, again, that additional data out of the I/O link devices, not just on-off, but also troubleshooting data. And then again, they can use the standardized cables rather than running special cables back to the cabinet and having to terminate each one. So as we get to the end here, I've got a final real-life example. We're going to take you through a video of a work cell that a customer built. And it integrates a wide variety of sensors, signaling devices, actuators, and so on, technologies, all through the use of I/O link. So here, the process starts scanning a barcode using a network barcode reader. We touch the capacitive buttons to start the system, and the robot now moves over to the next workstation, takes the two initial work pieces and moves them to the first workstation and presents them to the next robot for the next solution. Key thing here is you've got an inductive coupler that is on the end of the arm tool. So the first robot can change out the end of arm tool using the air gap for both signal and power because there's sensors on that platform there. This robot scans with a camera. The grippers are networked. The position detection in that is networked also through IO-Link. The sensor on the stand recognizes that the part has been presented. The robot adapts the gripper to pick up the second part and do the next function. All this data, all the position data, all the presence and object detection data is being networked back over IO-Link. And as we move through the process, you'll see a variety of different IO-Link devices that are detecting presence, detecting position. So for example, the press here, the up and down position, has a linear actuator. That's position is being measured by a IO-Link device, IO-Link sensor. In the front here, you can see two of the IO-Link blocks that are networking that part of the work cell over on the right. You've got a safety e-stop that's also networked over safety over IO-Link back to the safety controller. More of the IO-Link blocks here on the back side of this process. Again, more sensors detecting presence, detecting the closing of the shelf. You've got IO-Link signaling devices. Those were the smart lights. Here we're just managing the operation. And as the part finishes, it's being presented back. The gripper again is detecting that it's gripped the product part properly, connected back to IO-Link. We're now doing the other tool change here. You can see the light is indicating that we've made the connection. And the final part is being presented now back out to the operator. And you can see here we've completed the manufacturing operation. So for more information on this, you can visit our integrator, Boss Innovation. And as we finish up here, talk real quickly, what do you want to do next? If you want to learn more about IoT and device level protocols, you want to discuss an actual solution, you want to share best practices, let's connect and talk more for details. My information is here on the slide. Feel free to contact me or feel free to go to balluff.com, our website, to learn more about the automation solutions. Thank you for listening and have a great day.